congratulate the people of Joplin for their response. I want to say bless you to all those first responders, and I want to say that through the greatest tragedy sometimes comes the greatest strength. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Alabama.
I appreciate the fine remarks from my friend from Missouri, and seeing the damage that was done by the tornadoes in Alabama. They exceeded anything I'd seen before. I appreciate more than most, I think, the damage and difficulties the people of Missouri are going forward, and I know there will be emergency funding for that. There's a legitimate question as to whether we ought not to fund that emergency spending and someplace in our budget where it can be recovered that are not so important, but we'll process that, I know, as we go forward. Mr. President, I truly believe our nation is facing an economic crisis, but not so much what I believe, but what every expert that we've heard from believes and has testified to. Mr. Erskine Bowles, who co-chaired the Debt Commission being appointed by President Obama, said, along with Senator Alan Simpson, his co-chair, in a written statement to the Budget Committee, that this nation has never faced such a predictable economic crisis. In other words, the deficit levels we are operating with are so high, and they create such danger to the economy that we have to get off this path, is what they told us. Every expert has said we are on an unsustainable path. Many people have thought, well, the problem we're dealing with today places a burden on our children and our grandchildren, and therefore it's removed to some degree the immediacy of the problem, but that's not what Mr. Bowles said. In his testimony before the Budget Committee just a month or two ago, he said that we could have a financial crisis. When asked by Senator Conrad, our chairman, when, he said 2 years, maybe less, maybe more. Now, Senator Simpson said, I think it could be 1 year. So we are taking a risk with the American economy. This has been echoed by Moody's bond ratings. It's been echoed by the S&P, who warned that our debt rating for our government debt could be downgraded. Alan Greenspan has made similar comments. Alice Rivlin, former OMB director under President Clinton, made those comments. Pete Domenici, who co-chaired a debt commission with Alice Rivlin, former chairman of the Budget Committee in the Senate, said to us with real passion, I've never been so afraid for my country. That's what Pete Domenici said. And so we know we have to take action. And now we're heading today with 756 days since the United States Senate has passed a budget. We haven't passed a budget. And I would say with confidence that in terms of a real long-term threat to the American future, this nation has never had a greater danger financially and in debt, because the problems we face are more severe than even in the 90s when we turned our business around and 3 years balanced the budget. It's going to be harder to do it now. We went through World War II. We borrowed money, but we had a vibrant, growing economy and growing population, and we promptly moved our way through that, and growth took care of us. But we can't expect the level of growth, according to the experts, that we can reasonably predict, even optimistically predict in the future, will be sufficient to get our house in order. So when you don't have enough money, and the course that you're on is unsustainable, you need to develop a plan that puts you on a sustainable path. How simple is that? That's grown-up talk. And how do you do it? What's our mechanism in the Congress? This is a budget. This is Title II, Section 271 through et sec, and it has the Budget Act. We passed a Budget Act. It's law. Clever Congress didn't put any penalties on it, so we can violate it and not go to jail. We don't have to personally pay fines. But it represented a serious commitment by previous Congress that we needed a budget, and they also made as part of that budget law that it could be passed with a simple majority, so it could not be filibustered. That was one of the reasons budgets sometimes failed to be passed. And so they, at a time when they were thinking about the future, said, let's make the budget passable by a simple majority. It also has timelines in it. It says that the Congress must pass a budget by April 15th. Well, we're long past that. Long past that. Are we going on to a third year now without a budget? 1,000 days without a budget? While our country is on a debt path, unsustainable to a degree that threatens the future of America economically? Yes, that's where we're heading. So people say, well, surely, Jeff, that's not so. Surely there's some plan. There's not any plan. Not a plan to pass a budget. What there is a plan to do is not pass a budget. And it's irresponsible. It is unwise. It is dangerous for our future because we're on a certain path, a predictable path, as the Debt Commission told us, to financial ruin. And our debt to GDP will reach almost 100%, will reach 100% by September 30th this year. That's above the level that economic experts tell us put our country at risk. Indeed, when we passed the 90% of debt to GDP ratio, the economists Rogoff and Reinhart, who've completed a massive study of national defaults in economies around the world by sovereign states, have warned that at that level, you reduce the growth in the economy by at least 1% of GDP. The average was higher than that. They said on a median level, it's 1% of GDP, and they've used that number. 1% growth that we don't get. Well, some think we may not get 2% growth this year. Would we have gotten 3? If we had 2, would we have gotten, if we get 1, would we have gotten 2? 1% growth in GDP is a large thing in an economy the size of ours. It increases tax revenue, significantly increases jobs. According to experts, 1% of GDP growth means 1 million more jobs. A decline of 1% in growth in our economy represents a loss of 1 million jobs. This is not a little bitty matter. So on Monday, I objected. I realized what's going on in the Senate, that there's no plan to deal with this, that there's a gimmicked up scheme to bring up a series of budget votes that the majority leader knows will not pass. Indeed, he intends to bring up a vote on a budget that he and all his colleagues intend to vote against. The most responsible budget out there, the House budget passed by the Republican House, that's what they want to bring up and vote on and vote against it. But the Budget Act doesn't say bring up the House budget. It says each House, the Senate and the House should bring up their own budget, and they should pass it on the floor. It should go to committee. None of the budgets we'll be voting on have gone to committee. We've had no markups in the committee, not even had a markup on the budget. So why? What is this? What is going on? Let me share with my colleagues why we're not having a legitimate process to produce a budget at the most critical financial time in our history. And it's for politics. Does that surprise you? This is what Democratic staffers said, quoted in the Wall Street Journal article a few days ago. What did they say about it? Did they say we have a plan to solve America's future? Did they say we have a plan to improve our debt and reduce our debt and get us on a sound path? Did they say we understand that the future of the country is endangered by an unsustainable debt growth? No, they didn't say that. This is what they said. As a political matter, Senate Democratic strategists say there may be little benefit in producing a budget that would inevitably include unpopular items, close quote. So they don't want to produce a budget because they have an honest budget, a budget that would make a difference. It would have some unpopular items in it. Now I ask, is that responsible leadership? I suggest no. Well, it goes on. Quote, many Democrats believe a recent House GOP proposal to overhaul Medicare is proving to be unpopular and has given the Democrats a political advantage. They are loath to give that up by proposing higher taxes, close quote. What does that mean? It means their budget, if they produce one, would call for higher taxes. And they don't want to do it. They don't want to propose a budget that reduces spending. They don't want to produce a budget that has higher taxes. Why? Because they're playing politics rather than serving the national interest. That is as plain as day. I wish it weren't so. But there's no other explanation for this Senate preparing to go into recess Friday for Memorial Day without having even commenced hearings on a budget. So this is what they decided to do. I'm quoting from the article. Quote, Senate Democrats plan to hold a vote on the Ryan plan, the House budget, hoping to force GOP senators to cast a vote on the Medicare overhaul that could prove politically difficult, close quote. Now, give me a break. Is that what it's all about? Is that what we're here about? It's not what many of my Democratic colleagues tell me. They tell me they know we're on an unsustainable path and we've got to do something. But why are we going through this charade? To bring up 1, 2, 3 budgets, vote them all down, and then say, well, we tried. Maybe we'll have some secret talks over here and we'll plop something down right before some emergency date and demand everybody vote for it, half having had a chance to read it. Is that what the process is going to be instead of the open process where the Budget Committee has open hearings, has amendments offered, a budget is voted out of committee, it comes to the floor, there's a guaranteed 50 hours of debate, but the process comes to an end. The Budget Act sets forth how you can't filibuster it. It has only a limited time of debate, but there's an opportunity to debate, an opportunity to offer amendments. So we're told, well, you know, Senator Reid, he doesn't want his members to have to take tough votes. Well, none of us like to take tough votes. None of us like to take tough votes. Isn't that what we're paid for here? Isn't that why they send us here to vote on important, tough issues that impact the future of our nation? I'm telling you, I think we are so far off path that it's stunning to me. Well, what about, I quoted what his staffers said. What about Senator Reid himself, the Democratic leader of the Senate? And anybody that has worked with Senator Reid likes him. And I enjoy working with him. I respect him. I know he has a difficult job. But at some point, you've got to stand up and lead. He's not leading. Neither is President Obama. So this is what Senator Reid said just a few days ago, I think Friday. Quote, there's no need to have a Democratic budget, in my opinion. Well, there is a need of a statutory legal requirement that we have a budget out of the Senate. Then he said, quote, it would be foolish to present one. Why does he say it would be foolish? I think my good friend Senator Reid has taken his eye off the national interest. He's taken his eye off the crisis that our country faces. And he's got his eye on politics. He means it's foolish politically because he has a scheme. And this is what his scheme is, to bring up the House plan, the Ryan plan, which is really, in all honesty, the only plan I've seen in my time in the Senate that comes close to having a long-term financial alteration of the unsustainable path we are on. It deals with it. It makes some tough choices, but they're not unbearable, and they'll actually work, I think, most of them. It's not perfect. I don't promise I would vote for everything that's in it, but it is a historic project and plan to put America on a sustainable financial course. I thought they could have reduced spending more in some areas, frankly. But it puts us on a sustainable course. It's produced by a House Budget Committee that was intensely involved in it. They had public hearings, they voted on it, they brought it to the floor, and they voted on it and passed it in the House of Representatives, like the Congress of the United States is supposed to operate with. So what does our leader in the Senate do? And his colleagues who support him, they've made a decision to do something political, not responsible, not put forth a vision that they would have for the future, but to bring up the Ryan budget so they can all vote against it. Now, I don't think that's responsible. I don't think it's responsible at all. So I'm not going to participate in a scheme or this plot, have some sort of a series of votes that count me out. I'm not supporting it. I'm not going to give consent to it, my consent to it. That's the way I see it. I don't see it makes sense. If I did, I'd change my mind. But I see that it makes no sense for me to in any way consent to a process that is designed to fail. The whole thing is designed to fail. With a simple majority in the Senate, our Democratic colleagues can pass a vote. They've got 53 members here. They could pass a vote. They might get, if they put a good budget up, they might have a number of Republicans, maybe all the Republicans, if we reached a bipartisan agreement. But there's nothing close to that. We've not approached it in any realistic way. And so I'm concerned that we're off track. And, you know, Senator Schumer, who once last time headed the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee designed to elect senators, considered to be a guru around here of politics, and indeed he's a good one, and there's nothing wrong with being a smart politician. But at some point, politics goes too far. This is what he just said, May 23rd. We will exhibit this issue. In other words, he's going to call up the Ryan budget as an example of why we need to keep the Senate Democrat in order to counter House Republicans. We will point to this week and say the Republicans tried to end Medicare, but a Democratic majority stopped it. It's that simple, close quote. A pure political, open statement of raw politics. Where is the national interest? Where is the response to Mr. Bowles, a leading Democrat, Alice Rivlin, a leading Democrat, and their principal cries that we do something about the debt crisis we now find ourselves in? Nowhere. They want to go home. They intend to go home. Go home Friday. Our soldiers are out there. They're not getting to go home in Iraq and Afghanistan and going down roads where bombs might be planted and putting their lives at risk. They don't get to go home. Their business isn't finished yet. But we plan to go home, apparently, not having done anything but gone through a political exercise that's an embarrassment to the Senate at a critical time in our nation's financial history, a very, very critical time. The Fiscal Commission that President Obama created himself to seek a national consensus on funding, which he utterly ignored in his utterly irresponsible budget, I have to say, nowhere close to what's necessary to avoid our fiscal nightmare. That's not a Jeff Sessions quote. That's the quote of Erskine Bowles, who co-chaired the commission when he saw the president's budget plan that he submitted a couple of months ago. He said it's nowhere close to where they'll have to go to avoid our nation's fiscal nightmare. So that's what the president has done, and the Senate's done nothing. They won't even continue a markup and propose a plan. Because, why? They think it's politically unwise. They think that they can gain more politically by refusing to produce a budget, by attacking the House members who produced a budget as they are required to by law, that's honest and long-term, would make a huge difference in America, would put us on a sustainable path, not an unsustainable path. Now, I'll just conclude with a quote from the preamble to the Fiscal Commission debt report. This is what they wrote to us. So remember now, Senator Reid's plan is to bring up the House budget have all of his members vote it down so they can attack Republicans for having the audacity to propose any changes in Medicare. Not in the 10 years of the budget, not any of that. It's the out years that they're complaining about, and it's not law, doesn't become law. It would have to pass both houses of Congress, any change, but it's a vision that could work, I think, to make Medicare sound and save Medicare. They think they can scare people by saying we're going to end Medicare. And they're going to vote on it, and the vote in our Democratic politicians' mind is that we defend Medicare and all of you oppose Medicare. American people are getting too smart for that. I don't believe they're going to buy that path any longer. They know Medicare is on an unsustainable path. It cannot continue. The Medicare actuaries and trustees have just reported that it's going to last and go bankrupt a number of years sooner than was originally expected just today. But so this is what the Debt Commission said about the need to have a plan to fix our future. Quote, in the weeks and months to come, countless advocacy groups and special interests will try mightily through expensive, dramatic, and heart-wrenching media assaults to attempt to exempt themselves from the shared sacrifice and the common purpose. The national interest, not the special interest, must prevail. We urge leaders and citizens with principled concerns about any of our recommendations to follow what we call the Becerra Rule. Don't shoot down an idea without offering a better idea in its place. Well, isn't that a reasonable request? Don't shoot down an idea unless you're prepared to present a better one in its place. Isn't that exactly opposite of what our Democratic leadership is proposing? They're proposing to bring up a budget that they say they don't like. They're going to vote it down without producing anything in its place. That is not responsible leadership. It's not respectful of the budget process required by law, and is not in the national interest. It's not in the national interest. Yes, we're going to have to deal with tough issues. We find ourselves in a fix a deeper hole than we should ever have been in. And the American people punished congressmen and senators last year because they were unhappy. And they were right. There is no way that any member of this Congress can stand before their constituents and justify a deficit this year of $1.6 trillion and cannot defend or justify a budget spending program in which 40% of every dollar we spend this year is borrowed? What kind of possible sanity is that? It's really insanity. That's why every one of these people are telling us we've got to change, why PIMCO, the largest bond company in the world, has said they're not buying any more American debt. So, I believe that we need to get serious, make some serious changes.
Senator has used 20 minutes.
I thank the Chair, and we'll just wrap up to say that's why I think that the process plan for this week is unacceptable, and I do not intend to support it. I thank the Chair and would yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Oregon.
I ask unanimous consent that at 2 p.m. today, Senator Paul be recognized for up to 1 hour for debate only, that following Senator Paul's remarks, the Senate then proceed to a period of morning business for debate only until 5 p.m., with the time equally divided between the two leaders or their designees. Further, that the final 5 minutes be reserved for the majority leader or his designee.
Mr. President.
Is there objection?
I would reserve the right to object and will object at this time and would like to review that unanimous consent request.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President,
The senator from Alabama.
I assume we're not in a quorum call at this point.
We are not.
Mr. President, under the UC propounded by the senator from Oregon, I will remove my objection and will not object.
Without objection, then.
Mr. President,
Senator from Oregon.
I would ask unanimous consent, Mr. President, that I and Senator Cantwell be recognized now as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity to have the floor here for a few minutes. Senator Cantwell and I were joined on May 11th with 15 other senators. We wrote to the Commodities Future Trading Commission to request that that agency, which has a key role in consumer protection, take immediate actions to impose position limits on crude oil futures. And we asked that they would act by Monday, May 23rd. Now, position limits are limits on the number of contracts that a financial speculator can buy or sell at any given time, and it is extremely important, Mr. President, that consumers have this protection so that we don't see these speculators increasingly dominate the market. Because as the President of the Senate knows, we've got a lot of folks who need gas to get to work and get to school. We've got trucking companies that depend on affordable fuel. We've got restaurants that need fuel. They're all getting, clobbered today, and instead the financial speculators who don't buy oil or consume oil are constantly pulling more of the oil out of the commodities market. And what is so troubling about the approach of this key agency is they've pretty much said they're not going to do anything soon. They have no sense of urgency. It's not really a priority for them to try to tackle this issue. And in fact, they're not even going to use their interim authority. They won't even use the interim authority that they said they were going to use last year to protect the consumer at this crucial time. And this is particularly unfortunate because somehow they have reached the judgment that the only thing they ought to be moving on is to try to set limits as it relates to commodities generally. Mr. President, I can tell you my phone is not ringing off the hook about the question of cocoa prices. The American people are not up in arms about what's going on in the cocoa market today. They are concerned about the fact they're getting clobbered on this gas pricing, issue. And the fact of the matter is 40% of the oil future market is now dominated by financial speculators, and it's way past time for the Commodities Future Trading Commission to act to tamp down excess speculation and its impact on higher prices. Senator Cantwell serves with me on the Senate Energy Committee. She's been a leader in this issue, constantly tried to blow the whistle on this practice of speculation. It is not the only reason that gasoline prices are so high, but it clearly is a significant factor. If the financial speculators are taking so much of the oil and future oil out of the market to essentially hold this dominant position, that means there are going to be fewer opportunities for that person who's trying to get gas at the pump, the person who runs the restaurant, the trucking company, and why it's so important that we have these position limits. So this is a crucial consumer issue, Mr. President, and the Commodity Future Trading Commission's refusal to act quickly is especially upsetting because this agency knows better. They know better, and yet they wrote to Senator Cantwell and I and Senator Collins and colleagues that they really weren't going to do much of anything anytime soon. Now, in January of 2010, after holding 3 public meetings on fuel prices, the agency proposed to set position limits on 4 key energy commodities: crude oil, natural gas, gasoline, and heating oil. At the time, crude was then around $75 a barrel. Now, the Congress was so concerned about the need to control financial speculation that it expanded the agency's authority to set speculation limits last July as part of the financial reform legislation. That legislation specifically directed the agency to set limits on non-agricultural commodities like crude oil within 180 days of enactment, and that date has long passed. So, rather than getting started on protections, crucial protections for American consumers and businesses, the agency withdrew its January 2010 position limit proposal for energy commodities and basically started all over again. That is inexplicable, in my view, Mr. President, that you wouldn't even use your interim authority to take steps to help the consumer who's certainly going to be concerned about gasoline prices as we move into this Memorial Day weekend. Now, this past January, instead of issuing a final rule within the 180 days called for by the financial reform legislation, they issued another proposed rule. Now, it's certainly true that Congress gave the agency expanded authority to set limits on multiple speculation holdings in the financial reform bill, and not just future contracts. The result is there aren't any limits at all. That's the bottom line for the consumer today. Now, under the schedule proposed by the agency, in January, in its recent proposed rule, final position limits aren't going to be imposed until the first quarter of 2012, almost a year from now. That's what it's going to take based on the signals the agency is sending today. And at least one of the commissioners at the agency, Bart Chilton, has pointed out that this is truly contrary to the deadlines in the financial reform law. Now, we know, Mr. President, that most Americans walking on the streets, the main streets of this country, have not heard of the Commodities Futures Trading Commission. But that certainly doesn't diminish its role in overseeing the commodities markets. And that is why I've been pleased to join with Senator Cantwell and other colleagues to continue to press this agency to get out of the regulatory swamp and take steps to go to bat for the consumer today and wring the excess speculation out of the oil market sooner rather than later. Now, the agency was directed by the Congress to set speculation limits on more than 24 commodities. And as I've indicated, I'm sure that setting position limits on commodities like cocoa are important. But cocoa is not driving the American economy the way oil is every single day. Americans use about 19 million barrels of oil a day every day. Two-thirds of the price of a gallon of gas is the cost of crude oil used to make it. So setting limits on speculation on crude oil is going to have an impact on the price at the pump. The American people and our economy cannot afford to pay the hundreds of millions of dollars a month in additional fuel prices that come out of their wallet while they wait for the Commodities Future Trading Commission to act. The agency ought to get about doing what it proposed more than 16 months ago to do, and that is rein in speculation, the speculation that's driving up the prices at the pump. And the agency ought to do it now before more Americans face financial hardship. The country obviously is entering into the peak summer driving season. That's why I and Senator Cantwell and Senator Collins urged the agency to move and move now. I wanted to outline the agency's history of foot-dragging. I see that we're joined now by Senator Cantwell, who's been our leader in this cause. I say to my colleague, I so appreciate her leadership. This most recent response that we got from the Commodities Futures Trading Commission shows once again no sense of urgency, no sense of priority, not even a willingness to use the interim authority that they could use to go to bat for the American consumer. So I want it understood that I'm going to do everything I can to be your partner in this cause until we get these position limits set and get the basic protections that our consumers deserve. Mr. President, I would yield the floor now that Senator Cantwell is here.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the senator from Oregon for his stalwart attention to energy markets and to the concern that many West Coast residents have over high energy costs. Senator Wyden has long been a vocal critic of what's happened with the electricity market, what's happened with the oil markets when the West Coast paid higher gas prices than any place in the country. We wanted to know why. People said we were an isolated market and that's why we were paying the highest gas prices. And then Katrina happened and our prices still went up even though we were an isolated market. So he has long been a person coming to the United States Senate, fighting for the consumer and saying that we shouldn't be gouged by higher prices on energy. Energy is the lifeblood of any economy. And we know in the Northwest, we saw this with Enron, when electricity markets were manipulated, everybody told us, oh, it's just a bunch of environmentalists not allowing us to do new facilities. Oh, it's, this situation or that situation. Well, when we finally exposed the audio tapes, we realized that, no, it was just pure market manipulation. In fact, what we found out is that people were taking the futures market and basically making plays in the futures market while they also had the ability to affect the physical supply market of electricity. So by combining those schemes with different things like Get Shorty and Fat Boy and all these names they came up with, they were able to convince utilities and various customers that the supply was tight and that they were going to have to pay more for electricity in the future, and consequently they ought to keep paying these high prices. Well, thanks to a lot of hard work by a lot of individuals and ultimately the Department of Justice, the Enron schemes were called for what they were, just out-and-out market manipulation. Now, my colleague and I, Senator Wyden, screamed loud about that situation and would have said we wish the FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, would have acted a lot sooner on that issue, and that if they would have acted in basically taking away the market-based authority that Enron had, you would have saved a lot of jobs in the Northwest. You would have saved a lot of industries. A lot of people lost their jobs, their retirement, their home over those high energy prices for electricity. Thank God the result is we were able to pass new legislation creating federal crime for anybody to manipulate natural gas or oil markets. And I should say that FERC has used that authority over the last several years
to recoup millions of dollars of violations by industry officials who continue to perpetrate the same kind of scheme of going into the futures market and holding positions in the futures market and then going and taking physical supply and being able to affect the physical supply and demand. So this is something that is amazing to us from the West Coast, and I know my colleagues, Senator Feinstein, Senator Boxer, Senator Murray, we've all been on the same page. Senator Merkley has been a loud voice on this. We have been through this nightmare. We've been through this nightmare, and that's why I have to say, Mr. President, first and foremost, we find it appalling that someone would propose H.R. 1 or the Ryan budget and now want to take away policing authority from the Commodities Future Trading Commission on the type of activity that would allow them to properly regulate these markets. Now, we saw what's happened, and what we are so appalled about is it seems like it is happening again now in the oil markets. In fact, we see today on the front page of the New York Times, U.S. suit sees manipulation of oil trades. So the Commodities Commission is finally saying now, yes, we're looking at this case, and it should be no surprise of what they actually see in this case, because it's the same shenanigans that happened in electricity, the same shenanigans in natural gas. Yes, the same shenanigans is happening in the oil market. That is that the commodity agency says that in this case there was a close relationship between the physical oil price and the price of the financial futures, which moved in peril. So basically what happened is that in the oil futures market, these individual companies took large positions. In fact, their positions were so big, and that's why Senator Wyden has just described, if this agency would come in and set position limits, people wouldn't be able to come in and move the market in such a significant way. But at the same time, it's alleged that these companies actually had millions of barrels of physical crude oil, and that they actually had no commercial use for the oil. So here you have people buying the physical supply, again, to manipulate it and help it tie into the futures market when they don't have any commercial need for it. That is why it's so important to have the CFTC do its job on this and to interpret who are legitimate hedgers, like airlines, like farmers, people who actually need the physical supply, juxtaposed to these large institutions that are just coming in and moving the market. And so what's amazing is that at one point in time, what they had as far as physical supply for somebody who didn't even have a commercial use, at least according to this New York Times article, was that they had 2/3 of the barrels on the West Texas Intermediate exchange. So here's somebody that had the physical supply and was controlling 2/3 of it and then controlling the futures market. So they were basically making money on the upside and they were making money on the downside. That is what the CFTC is alleging in its case, and I think it's one of the first cases in which a small group of traders are being charged in the potential role of manipulation of gas prices. Well, I don't have to tell the presiding officer how critically important this is. I've been home recently and paid $4 a gallon for gasoline. Many people are starting what is soon going to be the summer driving season, and they are outraged at the price of gasoline. It is hurting our economy. People who have to commute to work every day, people whose businesses depend on reasonable fuel costs, are getting gouged over these prices, and we have federal regulators that need to be more aggressive at investigating these cases. Now, I'll say I'm very happy that the Obama administration and the Department of Justice appointed a task force. That is exactly what we need. We need every federal agency that has oversight of these markets, whether it's the physical market with the FTC or the CFTC in the commodities market, to work together with the Department of Justice to make sure that these schemes are not continued to be perpetrated on the American public. Our economy is too important to have this kind of activity continue to play the kind of havoc that it is on our system. And when you think about it, it's not as if we don't know what the scheme is. We have seen it time and time again with these other energy markets. So the question is whether we're going to be aggressive and make sure that the CFTC has the tools that it needs, that is, not to cut its funding like the Ryan budget or H.R. 1 wants to do, and that it actually takes this role and responsibility and starts setting position limits, starts the day-to-day activity, because the value that Senator Wyden and I are down here talking about is instead of this case that now is going to be investigated, how many days did we live with the potential of higher fuel costs if this case is correct? How many days did we live with the higher cost of that? And how long will the investigation take? Versus if the CFTC was actually implementing the law and the rules that we gave them and enforcing position limits, it would be policing the market on a day-to-day basis and preventing consumers from paying 1 dime or 1 penny more than they needed to pay on high fuel costs. And the reason why this is so important, I was hoping that we would get a chart here, but I guess it's probably on its way, is that it used to be that these oil markets were for legitimate hedgers. My colleague and I represent a very robust agricultural community. We grow lots of different products in the Northwest, probably over 200 different agricultural products. We depend on the commodities markets to hedge for the future. But that market, which was created after the Dust Bowl devastated so many farmers to give them a chance to legitimately hedge, now all of a sudden is captured by these large financial institution players. It used to be that those who really needed to hedge, like farmers and airlines, controlled 70% of the market. Now they're only 30% of the market. 70% of the market are these large players, just like this was described in this article, who are people who are out there basically using their financial weight to move the market in a direction that then they can sell on the futures market to benefit from. It's outrageous. It is outrageous that our economy has to put up with this, that individuals have to put up with this. And I know my colleague from Oregon and I are going to be out here and going to be loud and consistent on this until we have the rules and regulations in place to make sure that these markets are properly policed. We don't have to wait another day. We don't have to wait one more day. The Commodities Commission could be doing this job. They don't need another legislative bill from us. They don't need another vote from anybody on the Commission. They can use their emergency authority. They can implement these rules today and help consumers save on high fuel prices. So I hope that my colleagues will help us in this effort to bring up the issues and make sure the American public understands what's going on so we can bring the pressure to bear on getting proper regulation in place. I thank the President.
Would my colleague yield for a question?
Yes.
You've made a very eloquent case with respect to how this just hammers the people who need oil on a daily basis, those farmers and truckers and restaurants. And you juxtapose their situation compared to the speculators. For example, those people have a lot higher tax rate, for example, than do the speculators. So there is one advantage after another that the speculators have over the people that you and I are concerned about. Is it your understanding that the next best step to help those people who need oil, those small businesses on a daily basis, is to get the CFTC out of the regulatory swamp and to enact these position limits? Is that my colleague's understanding?
Well, if you're paying $4 a gallon for gasoline, you're affecting everybody who moves a product for business or anybody who commutes to work for any kind of distance and impacting. And I know you probably heard, I've heard a lot from small businesses who, when fuel costs become the second largest expense, it's hard for them to continue to do business. So the CFTC, you're right, could basically enforce this by just implementing the authority that we gave them under the financial reg reform legislation that we passed. That's all they have to do. Now, I would say to them they already have the emergency authority. They have so many tools at their disposal. I'm glad that they are investigating this case. I think this case is illuminating in the type of scheme that it might be that the details are so familiar to you and I of how people work these schemes. But I would say that an investigation of these schemes are only going to go so far to helping the American consumer. If they take another 6 to 8 months to investigate these schemes, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. So why not implement the rules that they have right now, put them in place so we can protect consumers, and certainly don't pass legislation here in the Senate or in the House that is going to take away the ability to stop kind of activities that drive up higher gas prices by manipulation. So we want enforcement. We want it now. We want protection of consumers, and we're going to continue to be vocal about this issue. And I thank my colleague from Oregon for joining me down here today to talk about this issue.
I thank my colleague, and I just think it's critically important that the Senate know that we're going to keep the heat on this issue. Senator Cantwell and I have tried to point out that the agency is dragging its feet. They could use their existing authority, and we just don't think with the kind of shellacking the American consumer and our small businesses are taking, that's not right, and we are going to continue this fight until they get the consumer protections they deserve. Mr. President, I have 10 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders, and I would ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor, and I would note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.